Paddy Power Shops have palped a winning golf bet on Ryggs Johnston. At 175 to 1, they're saying that that's not the price they're going to be paying at. So let's do a deep dive into this. Let's see what's going on. A punter has walked into Paddy Power Shop and they've placed a bet on Ryggs Johnston to win the Ispis Hander DP World Tour event in Australia, the Australian Open. Relatively unknown golfer. That's why he's 175 to 1. They've placed a bet on him to win each way, 6 places, 1 to 5 odds. He's won. They've walked into the shop, tried to collect their winnings, and the shop have said, no, you're not having the amount that you thought you were going to have. We're going to shave a significant amount of money off this and pay you at the equivalent of 125 to 1. So those are the facts of the case. Now, why would they do this? Well, they're saying that the 175 to 1 was a palpable error, palpable being a clear and obvious error. So we can do a couple of things here, because I think palpable errors are fair. You know, at bookie bashing on these videos, we try and be utterly fair. I've seen some torrid and unacceptable customer behavior that shouldn't be allowed or encouraged. I think arbing, whilst you should be paid out, you should then be shut down. Even things like court siding, especially on the exchanges, that's not particularly fair on the other person you're taking the price from. So it's not always clear cut here. So let's have a look at whether they should be doing it. Well, the first things first, 175 to 1. Was it an outlier price? Well, it was top price. Let's start there. But they were 6 places, 1 to 5 odds. Other bookmakers, Bet365, at the same time, SpreadX, even Paddy Power Online, Betfair Sportsbook, were 150 to 1. We get into a world of complication here because all the bookmakers offer different place terms for the golf. Some are 5 1 to 4, 6 1 to 4, 7 1 to 5, 8 1 to 5, 10 1 to 9. They're doing this because they're trying to protect themselves against the arbitrage players, and fair play to them. It is quite a clever thing to do, and it plays into the hands of value bettors that can price the field up themselves. But it does make it difficult to compare prices next to each other. One thing I will say is that Bet365 were 150 to 1, 5 places, 1 to 4 odds. Now, that means that the place part of it was 37.5 in decimal odds. 38.5, apologies. And Paddy Power Shops were 175 to 1, but they were 6 places, 1 to 5 odds, not 1 to 4 odds. That's the difference. They were 5th, not a quarter. And that means that the place there was only 36.0 compared to 38.5 if it was quarter odds. So whilst they're paying out a little bit more on the winner, they're paying out a little bit less on the place. Is 175 to 1 outrageous and a clear and palpable error when others are 150 to 1? I mean, Paddy Power are arguing they should have been 125 to 1. We're talking about, even at 125 to 1, the difference between 0.6% probability to win and 0.8% probability to win. These are really fine margins, and the normal person can't work it out. You know, you can work out the difference between 50% and 10%, but 0.8% and 0.6%, nobody could work that out. And I also found out that William Hill were 175 to 1 as well. I don't know if they were 175 to 1 at the same time, but they paid out 175 to 1 on their online app. So Paddy Power, I feel, are being a bit outrageous saying that 175 to 1 is a clear and obvious error when others were paying more on the place and paying out at 175 to 1. Does it matter what was happening on the exchanges? The exchanges can be quite funny in tournaments like this because at high odds, they're very swingy because of the low liquidity, because layers have to put £1,000 up to lay £10 at 100 to 1, don't they? So, to only win £10, you've got about £1,000 up. So they're very swingy, they're very low liquidity. However, betting.betfair.com have a blog up right now. The punters debrief, huge outsider Ryggs Johnston claims the spoils at the Australian Open, where they say that Lucas Herbert, the 6 to 1 favourite, shortened up to 1.8 but he was caught and passed by the 250.0 outside of Ryggs Johnston. So Betfair, in their blog, the partners of Paddy Power are saying he was 250.0. I didn't see it. I saw 160, and I actually was on him at 160.0. So it's difficult to know what he was on the exchange. And maybe, just maybe, there's a system in place at Paddy Power that looks at the exchange odds and says, nah, we're not offering that because this could have been an arbitrage bet. I don't think that's fair and right. I'm just trying to guess why they're thinking that this was unacceptable. But the other case could be they opened their book on Monday morning and they went, no, too many people have bet on this and we are way too in the red on Ryggs Johnston, this relative unknown that's come through DP World Tour qualifying school. And by the way, speaking to a shop, these guys that come through that school, that is the hardest thing to get through. And they might just be on fire with their golf. And just, it's easy to say this with a bit of after timing, but just perhaps 175, 200, 250 were ridiculously high odds for this guy. But that's what the market was priced at. Everybody was. So why have they done this? Well, at Bookie Bashing, we have a golf tracker and we send out tips, generally 8 golfers per tournament, as part of a weekly golf value service. We also put very similar tips up on our own site as weekly golf options to benchmark the return on investment that is available from our golf tracker. And we included Ryggs Johnston this week. So more people were probably betting on him at 175 to 1, 150 to 1, 100 to 1 at Sky Bet if you get the 10 places. More people than usual were betting on him. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the bookies did get a little bit stung. They tend to when there are high odds winners. They've had a great year on golf this year, especially when Scotty Scheffler was winning all of the tournaments at the beginning of the year. Unless the recreational players are betting on Scotty, the shops are betting on other people, all the shops are losing their money. 2 years ago, we said that Troy Mullinax in 2022 for the Barbasol and the PGA was a good bet at 175 to 1 at 10 bet. And he won. And people logged on Monday morning to see that a very similar situation with 10 bet. We're palping that, saying it was an obvious error, a stale price, and they're trying to pay out at 100 to 1. Well, that was unacceptable to us. That shouldn't be allowed. It's not the punter's fault if you've got a stale price. How was the punter meant to know? So between Bookie Bashing and Smart Betting Club, we applied a little bit of weight. We lent on our social media platforms. And I want to give 10bet some credit here. The CEO over in the Middle East phoned me up and I spoke to him for half an hour. And he explained what happened, which is they opened the book in the morning and they saw a figure that was simply outrageous. And they then made a decision to pay out at a lower amount because they thought that there was an error in the program. But then he said, we're going to make it right and we're going to pay out. Now, as they should, because you can't just look at when you've got a really bad book and decide you're not going to pay out because the guy won. If the guy didn't win, you're going to keep all of that money, right? I mean, when you shave odds from 175 to 1 to 100 to 1, are you raising the odds of anyone else? No one ever went to collect a bet at 40 to 1 and you're actually getting 50 to 1 because this other player was wrong in his price. That never happens. So you can't just be applying it to the winners, right? So you can't just look at the book in the morning and decide that this week you've had a bad week and so you're going to penalise the customers. So they did pay out 175 to 1. Then they restricted everyone that was on him to a single penny, which is their right. It's common, normal business practice. We might not like it as punters, but that's okay. They're allowed to do that. What they're not allowed to do is pay out at 100 to 1 when the bet was at 175 to 1. And this is exactly the same odds here. Paddy Power were trying to pay out at 175 to 1, or they're offering odds of 175 to 1. They're trying to pay out at 125 to 1. Now, how can I be sure? Well, full transparency, this is not my bet. I'm not invested in this bet. I have no equity in this bet. The person on this bet came to me for advice. I have done some due diligence. I've seen the bet slip. I've seen that it says 175 to 1. A computer printout says that, right? I see the expected payout and I see that's been scribbled out in pen, and a new payout at lower odds, 125 to 1, has been written by somebody. Okay? As far as I'm aware, this is a single person on a single bet. I haven't heard of him placing any more bets. Maybe he did. Maybe he had runners. I don't have a problem with that, but I haven't heard of it. So it's just him going into a Paddy Power shop and he's being stung for a lot of money. And if they're doing it to him, here's the thing, they'll be doing it to a lot of people. And this, at this point, when they're shaving 50 to 1 off the odds, is worth quite a lot of money for Paddy Power. I mean, somebody said 175 to 1 has to be a Palp because there's a 25-point difference between 175 to 1 and 150 to 1. No. If it's 30 to 1 to 5 to 1, that's a clear and obvious error. It's not the same rules up at 175 to 1. Okay? And shaving those 50 points off is going to be worth a lot of money to Paddy Power. Possibly millions. Okay? At least 100,000 minimums. Probably millions. Okay? But it doesn't matter if you had £1 on, 10p on, or £1,000 on. You see, it's not fair no matter who you are, no matter what stakes you're playing at. It's exactly the same for a 50p player as it is for a £5,000 player. The difference being, of course, the 50p player doesn't feel an inclination to complain. They're not going to go through the hurdles and jump through the hoops of IBAS, Ombudsman, Small Claims Court. And actually, that makes me very angry because now I feel like they're the ones that are being manipulated from and stolen from, and I want to stand up for them. So I did try and lean yesterday, and I once I'd done my due diligence, I messaged about this on the X platform. I need to address a few comments that came my way because, in all honesty, the UK bookie punter relationship seems to be at such an all-time low that this story has been met with suspicion by a lot of people. So let's clear it up. Somebody says maybe don't have all 17 of your runners betting on it at the same time. This is not my bet. I wasn't even on this tournament each way. I was trumpet. Ta-da! I was on a monthly exchange to win. Okay? But this is my bet and I have no equity in the bet. As far as I know, the guy whose bet it is only had one bet by himself in shops on his own. And if this has happened to him, it will have happened to other people. That's the first. Okay? If writing down the bet in pen, this is no different to the customer writing 250 to 1 on their own slip. The prices displayed on the printed forms are guide prices. They can't update the printed forms every time a price movement occurs. I know this. The punter did not write it down with pen. This is a computer-generated slip. I've seen it. So that isn't... he's not trying to angle shoot this by coming up with his own price, okay? Somebody says, betting an error is going to get them to play dirty, such as being an each-way thief on these bad each-way races. Bookies won't take it nowadays. There are too many algos out there. Lucas Herbert was a 6 to 1 favourite in a 150 to 1 field. And even if he was, and that made it a bad each-way tournament, and I don't think it does, but I mean, does that mean that we can't bet on the Hero World Challenge this weekend because Scotty Scheffler is 6 to 4? 5 to 2, but he's 3.5 in the exchange. What does that mean? Where are we now? Where are we that we're saying that he picked he's an each-way thief because the favourite was short at 6 to 1? What are we doing here? Justifying the behaviour of the bookmaker. You know, the bookmaker could have a book of anything if this is the line that we're going down, saying that, well, Lucas Herbert was short and I know he didn't win, but that means we're not going to pay out anyone else on the field. You're playing dirty by exposing the error in their market. Don't cry once they play dirty back. You can't have it both ways. I don't see an error. I do not see an error. Not a clear and obvious one. I fully accept he might not have been 175 to 1 and it was a stale price. But I don't understand how the punter could possibly know that. I think it's impossible. And given that it's impossible, given the market conditions and everything else, that the punter could not know that 175 to 1 was a stale price, this is a completely unacceptable reaction from Paddy Power. So, Paddy, look, you haven't spoken to me since you merged with Betfair Exchange, took a look at my account and decided that I needed my account frozen for safer gambling reasons. Since then, We haven't spoken. We haven't even really spoken about that. And I'd like you to reach out. I don't expect you to. Not like 10Bet. It's very honourable what 10Bet did because they had a conversation. I've used the @AskPaddyPower handle to get you to try and engage with me because you're welcome on my podcast. Not surprised to find that that's been ignored. So you don't need to speak to me. You just need to reverse your decision. Somebody has made a very quick, rational, decision looking at the books, thinking that this is a bit too much on this one guy right ahead of the Paddy Power Christmas party. You don't do this. You don't simply snipe and steal from the punter as a result of it. If you were taking too much on one particular high odds golfer, then at the time of bet placement, you could have rejected the bet. Don't even give an explanation. Say, I'm sorry, we're not taking any more money. You can have someone else. That particular golfer, we've taken too much. We're not going to be paying out millions and millions on this golfer. It's not happening. We've reached our liability limit. A few years ago, when there was a particular jockey that had 5 or 6 winners at a meeting, and the next day everyone was putting lucky 15s on and lucky 31s filled with him. And the bookmakers, Coral Ladbrokes, I think it was, had to stop taking bets because the liability was outrageous. Even though the odds of it happening were like 0.001%, it was going to bankrupt the bookmakers if they continued to take money. And it did happen. It was an unacceptable risk, and I get that. I get that you just can't lay everything for any amount. But the time for that decision wasn't after the guy had won, because you were taking that full stake had he lost. The time for the decision was at bet placement, at the counter. Paddy Power, pay that man his money.